Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Today, we are going to be covering a little bit of a different topic. It requires a lot of brain power because we're talking about, well, actually the brain and something called neuroenergetics with new friend. And I met her, a few months ago. We're kind of in a think tank with a whole bunch of different healthcare practitioners and got to meet Sharon, and we had a nice conversation on neuroenergetics. So I wanted to bring her on and introduce this concept to you because she helps people in a very amazing way, sometimes very quickly, sometimes it takes a long time. Obviously, everyone's different, but just wanted to bring her on. So thank you so much for joining us today, Sharon.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and to share this information. I think we have so many new healing modalities that are emerging. Well, they're not new. They're really old. And now they're starting to appear. And sometimes I feel like, oh, science is validating what we've known for millennia.
Yeah.
And I think it's very exciting.
That's wonderful. And I like, knowing a little bit about you. You're combining different fields together, but let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get into this field?
Yeah, so like a lot of health practitioners, I had my own health challenges and I needed to overcome them. Conventional means of looking at those were just not working, and they just didn't resonate for me, quite honestly. I was very overweight. I had depression. I had a number of physical issues and a lot of pain in my body. Physical pain, which I then learned is tied to the emotional pain that I had. And if you're open to it, spiritual pain. And so the conventional means didn't really work for me. And I started looking at alternative and complementary means. I'm going to take that back, really alternative, because the conventional just didn't really resonate and work for me. And so for me, it started with changing diet. I think that helped get our physical body really toned and working properly. And that's kind of that first pillar of health. And once that is working well, then we're ready to have all these other pieces come into play. Yeah. And so I just started learning about energy, which was new and old for me. I can remember, so how I really got into it, I found this one book. It was Barbara Ann Brennan's first book called Hands of Light. And she writes in there about her childhood. She was raised in an area that had forest, and she'd go into the forest and she was like communicating with the trees. And I know that sounds a little wacky. It really resonated for me though. I thought, wow, because I had that experience when I would go out into nature, and as a child, I just felt a connection that was so much more than, oh, there's a tree, it has a brown trunk and green leaves on it and some flowers. I felt a kinship with different elements of nature. And when I went through my late teens, early 20s, I experienced people, and it took me a long time to realize it was a way that was different from how other people experience people. I would literally get a sense of colors or sometimes see colors around them and just have a feeling. Now, probably you and a lot of the people who are watching have had an experience where you walk into a room and you just kind of get a vibe, right? Or maybe like you see that person across the room and there's an electrical charge. It could be good or bad. Right?
Yes.
That's feeling them energetically. And that is an energetic connection that we all have. And so I started learning about that in a more formal way. And really, it's applied quantum physics. In fact, Barbara Ann Brennan was a research scientist at NASA before she started really codifying and applying this work in a way that we can bring out into the public. And so I started learning a lot of these techniques and eventually went for a certification so that I could learn to work on myself. Part of my certification was working on over 100 clients, documenting and having to present case studies to a board. And so I really got a lot of hands-on experience and got to see how it can be applied to a range of issues. So again, for me, a lot of it, there was a lot of depression, excuse me, and a lot of underlying anger.
Okay.
I've worked with people people nowadays more, it's severe pain.
Mhm.
So I recently had a client with CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. I've had a lot of athletes who are clients who have rheumatoid arthritis and their meds are just not working anymore, or they want to cut back or not be on so many meds. Osteoarthritis, which is a different kind of arthritis. So all those kinds of pain where maybe things just aren't working the way they used to address the pain, and the clients need something else, and they really want to be out of pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit, how did you get into this field? Were you already a healthcare practitioner? Kind of what was your storyline into getting into this field? Because I know you have numerous certifications in various forms of the healthcare world.
Yeah, we all like to have lots of letters after our names.
Mhm.
And no, my first career was in art direction, graphic
Oh,
design.
okay. Wow.
And that was great, and I loved it. And I think that really gave me the basis for great analysis skills,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
being able to assess what's going on and what do we want that end product to look like. Because I
Hmm.
think you need to have both ends of the spectrum before you can figure out how to get from one place to another.
Yeah.
Right? So in my confusion of being in my 20s, I actually was doing some networking with someone, and she mentioned all the stuff for this new business she was starting, and she needed a graphic designer, and we agreed to barter. Well, it turns out that she was this thing called a life coach, which didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
In fact, she was the person who brought coaching to America. Coaching started as sports psychology in the UK.
Okay.
And so I did a program with her, and it was amazing. One of the things that she did with me was a process that she called life purpose. And
Hmm.
different from many life purposes today, which really are mission statements, what this did was instead balance the being and the doing in our life. And you walk out of that session, I walked out of that session with a simple sentence. And that sentence became the yardstick for measuring all my decisions. Like, was this on purpose and in alignment with my purpose or not?
Hmm.
That led to some really interesting experiences, which led to my joining the Peace Corps at age 30.
Oh,
I closed
wow.
down my business. Yep.
Hmm.
I got shipped off to Africa to teach art in a rural school.
Hmm.
And I did that for 2 years. And then I extended my tour for a third year to develop training materials because there were none. And that led to my next career, which was instructional design. So creating training. And I think I just have a lot of propensity for being a natural teacher, taking
Hmm.
complex information and making it simple.
Hmm.
So I worked in that field for a while, but on the side, I sought my old teacher and did more studies with her about life coaching. While I was away, she had started the ICF, International Coaches Federation. So that
Okay.
didn't even exist when I did my coaching
Hmm.
certifications. I, again, then had all these health challenges. And so then started studying nutrition and this energy work.
Okay.
And as I was healing, people started to notice what was going on for me. And they asked me to start giving some classes and teaching. And before I knew it, I was giving talks at restaurants and festivals and events and international conferences where 250 people were crowding into a room meant for 200, trying to hear what I had to say. It was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And it was in alignment with this purpose. So that was kind of the trajectory, life coaching and then expanding into all these different areas. And like anybody, we have ebbs and flows in our life. Things come up that are traumatic, that knock us off guard. And I had some of those come up, which then propelled me deeper into the energy work, but also to begin studying positive neuroplasticity. Very complicated term to say rewiring our brain.
Got it. Well, I've heard the term neuroplasticity before, but the whole positive adjective to that, I haven't heard that. Is there something different about it being positive neuroplasticity versus just plain neuroplasticity?
There is, I think there is. And I did those studies with Dr. Rick Hansen, who was really the pioneer in the positive neuroplasticity.
Okay.
And I think that it's a much more intentional use of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is that we're rewiring the brain. Okay, so what's the saying that they have? Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard a lot about, people who have negative self-talk, they're
Yes.
reinforcing all of that.
Yes.
Some of the approaches that some people take are affirmations, which are an attempt to flip that negative self-talk. What I find, though, is that if that's not connected to our bodies and our feelings,
Yes.
it's just platitudes, and it doesn't produce a real change. And so the positive neuroplasticity gets us in our body. It gets us remembering the good feelings and connecting the brain and the feelings in a really positive way. And then being able to look at those negative pathways that we've created. And we're not exactly changing the negative pathways. We're kind of putting those aside and then creating new pathways and focusing on making those new pathways stronger and the more predominant ones that are firing in our brain.
Got it. And so affirmations, is that one strategy or tool to help create this neuroplasticity, this positive neuroplasticity, as long as there's emotions or feelings with it?
It's a little bit different. So affirmations are much more of a verbal endeavor. The positive neuroplasticity is actually a physical kinesthetic endeavor.
Okay.
So whether we are out riding our bike, having an awesome bike ride, enjoying it, or we're having the memory of that awesome bike ride that I had last year at this time, physiologically, it's exactly the same in our body.
Right.
So in positive neuroplasticity, what we sometimes do is I'll have a client conjure up that memory and really ground it in the body. My favorite questions to ask are, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? And what does it feel like? And if the answer is, well, I think it's nice, I don't want you to think, what does it feel like? Feeling is warm, cold, fuzzy, sharp, right? So we really get in the body and then experience that. And through practice and when it's going, we suggest 10 seconds, 10 times a day, 10 days in a row will dramatically change your life. And so you can just drop into that bike ride and feel it in the body for 10 seconds. And it's like, whoa, suddenly I have this surge of energy. I feel awesome.
And what's nice is you can probably repeat something as simple as that, where you find joy. It's easier to repeat that throughout your day. But I can imagine also sometimes you could switch it up and use a different memory to elicit that same response, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. It's nice to have a little bank of different positive memories. And so that's the first step in creating some of these new neural pathways. What I do with clients once we advance past that is we then actually work at creating a balance. So we have these positive experiences. And then again, a bump in the road happens. You get a call from your boss and it puts you in a really crappy place, right? So those neurons start firing.
Yes.
Well, guess what? You can hold both of those in your brain and in your body simultaneously. And then you can intentionally decide which one gets bigger and has more weight. And so you can give importance to them very intentionally. And so that way, it is important to experience the negative things for what they are and thoroughly process them, but without getting overwhelmed by them and without having them shadow everything else that's going on.
Right. And I understand the push for thinking positively, reframing your mindset, but I also value that we do have negative experiences. And if we just push them under the rug, they typically hurt us in the long run. And I know with what I do, it gets stored in the body and you have to free it at some point. So I'm glad to hear you say it's not you're just ignoring them, indefinitely. You're going to work through them as well.
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's a positive way to work through them. And I know for me, perspective is everything.
Yeah.
And when something terrible happens, it's really easy to let it get blown out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. We don't want to just sublimate. I'm sure you've heard the saying, we have issues in our tissues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't want to store it there. We definitely want to get out of that.
Exactly.
So now that's neuroplasticity. And now if we go into biofield balancing, can you describe what that is? Because I know you said that neuroenergetics is a combination of biofield balancing and neuroplasticity. So can we go into biofield balancing?
Absolutely. So biofield balancing, if you want to get very technical, is applied quantum physics. I can tell you, I slept through most of my physics classes in high school, so it's taken me a different route to learn it. Yeah. And in a simple way, and again, pulling on a lot of these traditional modes of healing that are now becoming more popular. So some people may have heard of chakras or chakras. Mm-hmm. And depending on where you're sourcing that information, there are 7, 8, 10, 12 major chakras. And those are energy centers that we have in our bodies. Those energy centers are connected to organs, emotional issues, and physical issues. So those energy centers also emanate from the body. So for example, the throat is a major chakra. Okay. And I got a great visual from a friend of mine the other day. If you picture a funnel coming mm-hmm. off of my throat chakra, this goes into the biofield. Okay. So it's not only here, but it's also off of us. Remember, we talked about you walk into a room and you just get a vibe about what's going on in the room. Mm-hmm. That's because my biofield, which is way out here, is rubbing up against your biofield, which is way out there.
Got it.
So the biofield balancing is assessing what's going on in the chakras as they go into the body, and then also the fields as they're coming off of the body. Now, each of these energy centers functions independently, but like any electrical system, they're also hooked up to one another. And so they need to be able to run so that that electricity can run, and so that that electrical field is balanced. So what I see with a lot of clients, particularly nowadays, is that their upper chakras might be functioning well, but their lower ones are not. Honestly, 90% of my work begins with a lot of grounding, because mm-hmm. many people are not well grounded. And again, that goes to just our modern society. We spend so much time up here.
Yes.
and so, this is kind of exploding and often off kilter. Mm-hmm. So you've heard the term when somebody says, I'm just feeling beside myself. Mm-hmm. I literally have clients who are, their physical body is here, but their energetic body is shifted over to one side.
Yeah.
So in the biofield, I'm assessing what's going on. And you can do that assessment with hands when you're trained. You can do it with a pendulum, which is a tool that also needs to be programmed and trained. You can measure it with an ECG. I don't happen to have an ECG in my office. I don't know too many people who do, but they're all just measuring electrical impulses.
Okay. And how would you do that with a pendulum?
Yeah, so pendulum, so I have one right here. So let's see, I think you can see it against my shirt actually pretty well. Mm-hmm. So this is a demonstration I often do because it helps people to really understand. So a pendulum can swing in a lot of different directions, okay? And sometimes it depends how you program your pendulum, depending on what schools you've gone through. So for mine, I'm going to show when my pendulum is swinging in a big circle like this, that to me indicates a chakra that's healthy and happy and working well. There are times when my pendulum just goes in a straight line, and that can show that there's a blockage. There are times when it's absolutely still.
Interesting.
So I'm going to take my other hand and cue into my solar plexus chakra right now, because that's a pretty strong one for me. And you can see now my hand is not moving. Yes, there might be micro movements because I'm human and not a robot, but,
Yes.
but most of the time, in fact, I'll do it palm up because it's a lot harder to move the hand when it's palm up. So you can see how the pendulum is swinging now, okay? Because I am trained and I have a lot of experience working with this, I can actually close down my solar plexus. So I'm going to close it down and watch the pendulum. So now my pendulum is stopping to move. Now there's no way I could stop it with just one hand holding it the way I'm holding it. Right? So let me open it back up. And yes, breath work helps to move that prana, that chi, that energy, that electrical impulse. And you can see it starts working again. So the pendulum, it's kind of like an easy cheat tool for me to see what's going on. I also do feel it in my hands. And a lot of times clients will feel heat coming off of my hands.
Okay.
You can't see this, but I'm not a very tall person. I'm just over 5 feet. And when somebody's on my table, again, I do a lot of grounding and I usually start working at the feet and then I'll work my way up the body. And oftentimes I leave an energetic connection on the feet. And so they will actually feel my hands on their feet and feel my hands on their shoulders. And I've had a lot of clients say, how are you doing that? Because there's no way you have that long of a reach.
Yeah, absolutely. So when they're going through this biofield balancing, you're assessing them first, I assume, and with the pendulum or the other forms you mentioned, and then you start working with them on correcting the chakras, correcting the flow of energy or chi or prana. Is that right?
Yes, that is exactly it.
Okay. Now, when you're going through that process, is that a separate whole entity from working on the neuroplasticity?
So it depends on how people want to work and what they walk in the door with. When, some clients, if they're severely in their head, we really just need to start with getting them in their bodies. I have some people walk in the door. I had someone just the other day who is just so up in her head. I don't think she's ready to change that yet. And part of it is we need to get her body to remember what relaxed feels like.
Right.
And so we need to build kind of those muscle memory, that body memory. And I think that sometimes that then helps to open the doorway to see the possibilities of changing the stories and then changing the neurophysiology.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we don't change how our body feels and relaxes and senses, it's hard to fully change our brain because we're always holding back a little bit.
Exactly. So you're right. When someone comes in, I'm doing a physical assessment. We begin by talking, and I need to learn a little bit of the background and what happened, but also more importantly, where are they now and what do they believe and intend about their healing? I mean, I will say I had one case, and this is miraculous and outside the norm, but this person had chronic regional pain syndrome, which if anyone has heard of that, it's commonly called CRPS. It is just incredibly painful and systemic. Now, this person's was localized, which it can be. Hers was in her pinky finger. And this is somebody who, by the way, has a severed nerve in her neck, has had MS, host of other things, and she just lives in chronic pain. But the CRPS was in her pinky finger. It was swollen to about 3 times normal size. It was kind of that purplish color when there's internal bleeding and things going on. She wasn't sure. She had won a contest, and so she won like a mini session from me. She got on my table, and in 20 minutes, we got the swelling down. Her pain went from a 10 to a 2. She texted me later that day, about 2 hours later, and she said, okay, my pain is down to a 1 now. She texted me the next day and said, my pain is gone. And this is someone that has kept in touch with me. And honestly, we are a 1.5 years later. And she just texted me recently and said, my pain is still gone. And the color is normal and her pinky functions normally. Now, this is somebody who was also really open and intended, like, she needs to be rid of this pain. She needs to be comfortable again.
Yeah. And that's the key. When you're looking to transform someone's life, they have to be open for it and the process that you put them through. Because if their body is not open, it's not going to receive, the transformation can't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So now biofield balancing and neuroplasticity, we kind of gone over both of them. How do they combine into neuroenergetics, and can you explain how that comes to play?
Sure. So a lot of people walk in the door and we start with biofield balancing, and those sessions are typically an hour long.
Okay.
And I should mention that because it's quantum physics, it applies outside of the office as well. So I work on people remotely. And the analogy I love to explain that is, when you're in your car and the radio is there, the airwaves are just out there, but you have to tune into the radio station. And, sometimes you tune in and it's kind of staticky, right? And if you keep tuning, you can fine tune it. And then those radio waves come through the antenna of the car, and you can hear the song really well. And then you start dancing and you feel really good.
Yes.
Well, it's the same kind of thing. And so I also do offer remote sessions because we're just talking about electrical waves that are out there. So people come in or book a remote session, and we talk for a few minutes on the phone if it's a remote session, just to see if there is anything acute pain. You bumped your elbow yesterday, or you had a fight with your spouse and you're feeling crummy. And then we hang up the phone if it's remote, or here I just ask them, go into relaxation mode. I encourage people to close their eyes and just go within. And then I assess what's going on with the body and off the body. And then I do what the energy tells me to do. I'm kind of, do I need to tune into the rock station or the country music station? Just depends what the analysis shows, right? Clients report that they feel relaxed. Sometimes they fall asleep. Sometimes they see colors, or they have memories come up. Sometimes none of that happens and they're just laying on the table. Sometimes I get information and I'm like, okay, I don't know what this means, but there was a blue feather that came down. This actually happened to somebody once, and she's like, oh my God, that's my boyfriend, and he passed away, and that's always been the sign that he's with me. Or I had somebody who she would have the smell of oranges come up, and turned out that her mother used to wear a perfume that smelled like oranges.
Wow.
So that was an olfactory memory that came up for her. Sometimes I do use very specific techniques. So my original certification is in healing touch, which was nurses continuing education. They opened it to non-nurses. I am not a nurse. But there are specific protocols there. There's lymphatic drainage. There's the body interview, which is a great process when somebody has an injury and they really don't know how it came about. So I see that a lot, especially with joints like knees, ankles. They're like, yeah, I don't know, my knee just started bothering me one day. And it's important to find out what happened. Now, as you probably know, if it's a middle joint like that, we'll often see things in the exterior joints. So meaning if it's a knee pain, it could be hip, it could be ankle, right? So we want to explore what's going on there. And as you said, we hold information inside our body. So this interview process really helps people to recall things on a deeper level. I guess I should mention that part of what happens during the biofield treatments is people are getting into different brain states. So we might be familiar with alpha, beta, delta, and theta, right? Alphas are doing, right? Type A's live in alpha. Our beta is a little more, we're cognizant, we're thinking things through. Theta is when you're in that kind of dreamy stage. So when you're first drifting off to sleep, or when you're first waking up, you're in theta. Right. And that's often what happens when we're doing this work together. And being in theta, which is also where people are when they meditate, empowers them to get in touch with memories and information that's not available to them when they're in their, conscious computer brain.
Yes.
So we do the work. again, interview, assessment, doing the biofield work, and then I ask them to take time, let that integrate, and then we do talk afterwards. So if they're in my office, we talk about what came up, what does it mean, how can you work with that information. If it's remote, I do ask them either for a follow-up phone call or an email within 24 hours. And they share what came up on their end. I share what came up on my end. I'm a huge proponent in people owning their health and taking charge of their health. So I'm really big on homework. when things come up, I will suggest different exercises, for lack of a better word, that people can do either to process this thing which has come up, to keep the energy flowing and open, to take it to the next level. Again, kind of depending on what their intentions are and what comes up during the session.
That's wonderful. And when you're doing this virtually, is it all through the phone or do you do it on Zoom?
Usually it's a phone call and then we hang up the phone because I want people to be really present and in their bodies. And I actually have a video on my website that talks through what happens in a virtual session. It's kind of funny and kind of cheesy, but I have a stuffed animal. I have a Snoopy. I don't know if you can see him way back on my bookshelf, but Snoopy goes on the table and he's the body double for my client. And that just helps me to focus on the hand placements a little bit more. So when I'm touching Snoopy's feet, I'm touching your feet and grounding you.
Okay. So now, can we go through who it helps? You've mentioned chronic pain and depression, but what are some of the other categories of ailments or conditions that it helps?
So it is also really great for people with anxiety. It can be generalized anxiety. It can be anxiety of a physical condition. It can be social anxiety. Now that then sometimes calls into a little bit more of the life coaching. And what I love about this point in my career is there are so many modalities that I blend together.
Yeah. And it's great because you have this experience in all these modalities. So as you're going through, if you spot something that needs to be addressed with a different modality, you can easily suggest it or start implementing it.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So when someone comes in, so they have depression, anxiety, or pain, they come in, they want to get some help. You said the first session's about an hour for the Biofield Balancing. When do you do a follow-up visit? Is it a week out? And is that also an hour? What does that process look like?
Thank you for asking that question. It's a great question. And in some ways, it depends on the client and what their needs are, how acute the situation is. And of course, we always have to look at people's budgets. I know I'm budget conscious. But the other piece is that in all of this work, we are repatterning. So whether we're repatterning this energy or we're repatterning the brain, we have to be consistent, and it's like building a new habit. So the frequency can be really different. For somebody that's severely acute, I've had people come 2-3 times a week, for a couple of weeks, and then we start making it once a week and then every other week. My rule of thumb in any of my modalities, I will never go more than 3 weeks. And that's because we are building these new habits, these new patterns, and it's just too long and it doesn't hold up when there's that big of a break. So there's flexibility in how often, and there's flexibility in how quickly these changes will happen. Again, it depends on how much ownership the person has and takes about their own health. And it depends on the patterning. You can have broken wiring in your house that kind of sort of works until the day a fire breaks out and it doesn't work anymore, right? So it's the same thing. With most people are walking around and they have these energetic patterns and they're able to survive and get through. They're just not functioning as well as they could be. And so it takes time to rewire.
Right. And the amount of stress we have in our life, that also blocks our ability to transform. And, stress, when it puts us in that fight or flight mode, our ability to have attention or focus on something, it goes out the window. So learning how to rein that in and allows for transformations like this.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is wonderful. Is there any last bit of information that you want to share with people on this process and what happens?
Oh, golly. I think just that it is transformational. It has been for me. It has been for people I've worked with. And like I've said, I've seen people with physical pain, emotional pain, trauma. So it can work on a number of different levels. It does have to be the right fit. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity that people are getting a little bit of a sense of who I am here. If they go to my website, they can actually book a free phone call, and that will help us see if it is a good fit on both sides before they choose to make an investment and before they choose if this is the right pathway for them or not. And that website is just my name, SharonGreenspan.com.
Wonderful. Are you on other social media as well?
I have a private Facebook group, and
Okay.
it's Sharon's School for Healthy Living.
Oh, nice.
I could give you that URL. And I do keep it private because I think it's important to have that sense of community and that safe place to open up. We recently ran a challenge of healthy drinks last month. And I'm actually just launching in this month, I'm going to do a challenge of Move More. It's Move More for May. And so I'm going to help walk people through, how to get a little more movement. So whether you're somebody who has a sedentary life and you know that you should be exercising a little bit, or you're a triathlete and you just want to squeeze in that extra 5 minutes on your workout once a day, or maybe you want to get an extra workout in every day. This will help you to explore that. I do have a business page on Facebook, so people can connect there, but I'm not too much on all the other social media. And frankly, it's because that's how I have to manage my energy. And I think that's an important piece of what we all have to do.
Absolutely. We sometimes get sucked into the social media bubble and it's hard to break out. It's not easy to pop, and becoming grounded in who we are sometimes means going out in nature, really spending some time in peace and quiet and away from the barrage of information on social media. So I got it. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this information. You're another great resource that we have on each week to help people get to know different fields in the health and wellness space that are not commonplace and not something that we hear from our primary care doctor. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Amy.
Wonderful. And those of you, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening today. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.